Hi everyone, welcome to episode 15 of my small block Chevy Dream. As you can see here, the engine's out of the car. We've returned back after the event that we ran, and we've started tearing the engine apart and seeing what we can find. Obviously some ugly stuff with the oil pressure numbers we were seeing. I'll remind you there, we had like 35 pounds at 9600 RPM, and that's not a good blend. So we thought we'd see some ugly stuff in there, and we were right. When you break it down, drag racing's just a series of challenges, and this is just one of the challenges we're faced with. We'll overcome that, and I can tell you the motivation that keeps us going is the potential this thing's showing so far. And to be on the throttle 2.1 seconds and only be a tenth off our best 330 numbers, and only a few tenths off our best eighth mile numbers, with a car that's, basically slipping the clutch 30 to 40%, it's showing us so much potential. I think we're going to achieve our goals with this. If we can make it reliable, I think we've got a bit of a rocket ship here. So let's see what happens in the future, and hopefully we can do what we set out to do. Let's have a close look at these main bearings here, and here we have the 5 lower halves of the mains out of the engine, and that's number 1, and you can see that browny grey colour there. That's pretty much the colour of the bearing when it comes out the box, but these centre 3 mains here, you can see they're definitely not happy. It's really taken that top layer off, and what you can see, that shiny finish, that's the second layer. And here in this shot, once I get it focused, you can see, where are you? Yep, you can see that bearing material actually being squeezed out, and that's the result of an engine that's doing big RPM, 9600, and only having 35 pounds of oil pressure. So that cushion of oil that's normally pressurized at quite a high pressure, a lot higher than your oil pressure gauge when you've got a crankshaft spinning around and the centrifugal force pushing the oil through the oil gallery into that bearing. It's a lot higher than what your gauge says, but our gauge said 35 pounds, and that ain't going to cut it. That's what you end up with, is a bearing that you throw in the bin. So really quite lucky that we only did the 2 launches, and here we can see number 2 rod bearing. That's the lower half with the dowel hole, ugly, and the top half, we can see that little slot there, that little I'll point to it here somewhere, if I can, that spot right there, you can see that's getting a bit hot. So if we had gone further down the track with the oil pressure as it was diminishing, that would have picked up and that would have turned ugly. So I knew there was an oil pressure problem. I was actually looking at the oil pressure readout on the dash, not where I was going, because I was that worried that the oil pressure would drop to 0. But we still had 35 pounds, so it's not ideal, but we'd put a lot of effort into going to that track, so we're just trying to balance on that knife edge and get the maximum amount of runs that we could without hurting anything. And really, we went there to do 2 launches, and that's what we did. So we really achieved what we wanted to. Rod bearings aren't any better. It all looked pretty ugly. I think we've proven the fact that you need oil pressure. That's a no-brainer. But, we'll get into this oil pan issue, and hopefully we can nail that over the weekend and put this little challenge behind us and move on to the next drama that I'm sure we'll come up with. Another indicator of the bearing getting hot, and this can be detonation as well, but it'd have to be pretty severe to see it on a main bearing, but is that the bearing doesn't actually snap in and out of its cap. Normally the bearing's got a bit of spring, and it's almost as if the bearing is too big for the cap, and you've got to sort of push it into its position. Whereas these things have been running now for basically 2 launches, and with that lack of oil pressure, the heat that's produced from that, they've just lost their rigidity a little bit. So it's another reason to dice these bearings and start with new ones. Something else I'd like to point out that's characteristic of aluminium blocks when you run a steel cap. So you can see on the edges of the mainly the center 3 caps, that aluminium that's grown onto the cap. This is due to the aluminium block grows at one rate and the steel cap grows at a different rate. So you get that bit of a movement between the two, and that alloy tends to just grow onto the cap. It's not severe, but it's definitely something we'll keep an eye on. I've seen it many times, so not really concerning, but yes, definitely keep a log of it. While we're at it, we'll have a quick look at the top halves of the main bearings, and as they're getting fed oil, they're normally a lot nicer to look at. The characteristics of these engines, the crankshaft's trying to get pushed out the bottom, so it's always the lower half of the main bearing that sort of has the most load. And while I was at it, I did have a bit of a look at the cam bearings, make sure they're not moving. They've been marked, so I knew whether they'd been turning or moving back or forward, so that'll look pretty good. So I'm happy with that, because again, alloy block, it grows. The tension holding that cam bearing in is lessened as the engine gets hotter, so it's just something else that we wanted to check and make sure was sweet. So pretty happy with that side of it. These bearing issues are a direct result of the oil pan not doing its job. So this weekend I'll be nailing that sucker and getting the oil pan modified so that we don't have this issue any longer. Let's have a quick look at this oil pan issue. And so there's the oil pickup, and obviously the engine's upside down with the crank out. So the oil pump's at the rear of the engine on a small block Chev. So what I feel is happening is, under acceleration, the oil is in the bottom of the pan here. Obviously this is where the oil's held, and I think under acceleration the oil's actually traveling forward. Right here there's a counterweight, and I think that counterweight turns the oil up, turns it into froth, and not only does it do that, but the oil's actually running away from this area, which is where we're trying to capture the oil. So what we're going to do is make a flat plate that sits in this area. It'll have to be shaped around the oil pump, and so the oil will come up, hit that, and it can't travel any further. So therefore the oil that's in the pan will come along and hit that, and most of the oil will stay around this area. You won't be able to control it all, but all we can do is try and capture most of the oil so that it has sufficient oil pressure to survive the run. And what happens after the run when you pull the chutes, well, that's a whole different ball game. So one thing at a time. We're just going to manufacture a plate that's going to sit in here. It'll be bolted, and that should hold the oil from actually wanting to run up the back of the rear main here and back out and hit this revolving crankshaft that's doing 10,000 RPM. It's just like a one of them bloody milkshake makers. It'll just turn it into aerated oil, and we don't want that. This is the camshaft. That'll look sweet. I've looked at each lobe. There's normal wear on it, but nothing to be really concerned about. The gear looks good because we still drive our oil pump off that gear. That all looks pretty good. So that's something that we can wash up and be ready to assemble. All the gear drive looked good. There was no dramas there, so pretty happy with that side of it. the crankshaft, and it all looks pretty good really. I won't bother crack testing it, but you can see on these front rod journals, if I can get the right angle, see it's got small lines in it. So that's rod journal 1 and 2. 3 and 4 are similar, but then the further back we go, the better they look, and that's because the oil's delivered to the rear of the rear bearings first, and the front ones are the last one to see oil. So, and the other fact is that number 2 cylinder basically had fuel coming out of it on our first pass or our first launch, and that would put more pressure on that bearing, and that's that bearing I showed you earlier on. So all in all, we'll put this back in the lathe, give it a polish like I explained before with AutoSol. It'll come up like brand new, and wash it all up and get prepared to put this thing back together again. Well, that's pretty much it for another episode. I hope you guys get something out of this. It's not all beer and skittles. It's not always ultra interesting. There's many challenges we're faced with to deal with, and it shows the strength of a team to overcome some of these challenges. And it's a lot of money at the end of the day. If we hurt the engine, it puts us out for a long time. So I don't want to do that. I want to make this thing as happy as possible. So anyway, we're looking at testing, I think it's December the 3rd, back up at the bend. So that'll give us an opportunity to try and get the car to go to the 8th mile, and it'll also, we're going to treat it as if we're running at an event, even though it's a test and tune and we can pretty well run when we want. I'm going to try and get the car turned around in the allocated time that you would have at an event, so the crew can actually get used to the stress and the pressure of an event. So anyway, if you're around the joint, come and have a look. If not, again, we'll have some more video of the car running and what new challenges lay ahead of us. So thanks for joining us, and we'll hopefully catch you on the next one.